If you've been driving a manual transmission car for a while, you probably know how it's supposed to feel when you press the clutch to change gears. So, when something doesn't feel right, you should pay attention. One part that can cause trouble and you may not be familiar with is the clutch slave cylinder. What exactly this thing is, how does it work, and what are some signs that can help you figure out if it's going bad? Let's find out. It's Max the Car Guy. Subscribe and let's get started. Bad slave cylinder symptoms. Even though you shouldn't need to replace a slave cylinder all that frequently, if it is beginning to fail, it will cause some obvious issues. If you experience any of the following signs, a faulty slave cylinder may be the cause of the issue. The likelihood that this is the case increases as you notice more symptoms. Soft clutch pedal. One of the most obvious symptoms of a bad clutch slave cylinder is a soft clutch pedal. This makes sense because you'll feel it in the clutch if the cylinder starts to fail because it won't push back as hard to re-engage the transmission. Additionally, you might experience spongy or sporadic pressure on the clutch pedal when depressing or releasing the pedal. Difficulty shifting gears. It makes sense that if either part starts to fail, you'll start to experience difficulty shifting gears because the clutch slave cylinder and master cylinder work together to assist your car in doing so. When your car is trying to shift into the next gear, you'll frequently notice a problem if the clutch slave cylinder is damaged. Leaking or low fluid level in clutch slave cylinder. To keep everything well lubricated and moving as it should, the clutch slave cylinder uses oil. If the seals fail, this fluid may leak out all over the place. If that occurs, it won't function properly going forward, and you'll have to replace it. Either you actively find the leak or you notice that there isn't enough oil in the engine. Since it's a sealed system, you need to replace it if the oil level drops due to a leak. Contaminated clutch fluid. If the clutch fluid in your car is dark or tainted, one of the seals in the system isn't working properly. Both the seals around the clutch slave cylinder and the clutch master cylinder could be at fault in this scenario. Grinding gears when shifting. When the clutch slave cylinder is performing as it should, the transmission shifts into gear right away when the clutch pedal is released. Speed is crucial because if it isn't, gears may begin to grind and cause further issues. When shifting, if you start to hear grinding gears, you should investigate the cause as soon as possible because grinding gears can cause further harm. Clutch pedal sinks to the floor. The clutch slave cylinder won't re-engage the clutch plate if it isn't functioning properly. Nothing is pushing the clutch pedal back up into position at this point, so it often starts to sink to the floor. The speed at which the clutch pedal depresses the floor will determine this. It might drop suddenly occasionally, or it might drop gradually to the ground. Squeaky sound when pressing the clutch. You should only hear the clutch engage when you depress it. It may be a sign of a clutch slave cylinder issue if you start to hear grinding or squeaking sounds. If there is a leak and the slave cylinder runs low on oil, or if parts can no longer move as they should without a little extra force, the slave cylinder may start to make these noises. Hard clutch pedal. Although a soft clutch pedal is more typical than a hard one, it all depends on how the clutch slave cylinder malfunctions. For instance, you might find it difficult to disengage it if the cylinder fails and remains stuck in the position where it is pushing too hard to keep the clutch plate depressed. Although it's not the most likely scenario, the cylinder can fail in this manner. Causes. Since clutch slave cylinder failures are uncommon, you should ascertain the cause if one does occur on your vehicle. Hydraulic fluid contamination is the most frequent cause of clutch slave cylinder failure. The seals will break down as a result of contaminated hydraulic fluid, and the clutch slave cylinder will leak as a result. Foreign contaminants entering the system and causing components to rust or fail in other ways are possible additional causes of clutch slave cylinder failure. This may occur if the clutch master cylinder's seal is damaged or if a hose somehow allows contaminants to enter the system. Even if the clutch slave cylinder is on an older vehicle, it usually won't fail as long as the fluid is kept clean and contaminants are kept out of the system. Replacement cost. Whether your vehicle's clutch slave cylinder is inside or outside the transmission will affect how much it will cost to replace it. The majority of the time, they are outside the transmission, and their replacement costs are significantly lower. This is due to the fact that this task typically only requires 1 hour of labor, as opposed to the 8 to 16 hours of labor required to remove and reinstall the bell housing. However, since they're typically outside of the bell housing, you can typically anticipate paying a professional mechanic between $200 and $250 to install a new clutch slave cylinder. About $100 to $115 of this cost goes toward the part, with the remaining funds going toward labor. You must multiply the shop's hourly rate by 8 or 16 and then add an additional $100 to $115 for the part if your vehicle's clutch slave cylinder is located inside the transmission. Rates for auto repairs can vary significantly, usually falling between $75 and $150 per hour. Therefore, if you go to a shop that bills at an hourly rate of $100, you could expect to pay between $900 and $1,700 to replace a clutch slave cylinder that is housed inside the transmission. You now understand how crucial it is to maintain the hydraulic fluid in your clutch system. Hope the information was useful for you. If so, please press the like button and subscribe to the channel.